I'm not really sure exactly how much nutmeg I have to eat to overdose, but we may get there today. Welcome y'all to another episode of The Spice Show. Today we are featuring nutmeg. It's pretty much time for the holidays, and as you know, we love our warm winter spices come fall. Now, if I'm honest with you, I was not really ever a fan of nutmeg, but I do my job and my job calls to explore this spice. It looks like a little dried pit or perhaps a very tiny dinosaur egg, and once you shave it and grate it, it reveals itself to have this pattern that looks like a brain. Honestly, quite freaky if you ask me. Not gonna lie, when you eat it straight, even in the tiniest amount, all I can taste is bitter. Definitely don't go overboard on this. However, when you do smell it, it has that characteristic, almost perfumey quality to it. Smells a bit like cedar and pine and age. It just smells like time has elapsed. So to help me and you appreciate this spice, I've brought back Ethan from Burlap and Barrel to teach us a little bit more about what nutmeg is, and we are going to the source. Ethan has brought along Bobbie, who's one of Burlap and Barrel's partner growers of nutmeg, and she's located in Grenada. Thank you so much for joining me, Bobbie and Ethan, today. It's a Friday. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day, and I am so excited to learn all about nutmeg. And Bobbie, your life is nutmeg, and Ethan, your life is spices, and I'm just gonna smack the two of them together and you will attack me with education, I hope.
I really hope.
It's great to talk to you, and Bobbie and I got to spend a couple of weeks together in July in Grenada on her family's nutmeg farm, which was pretty incredible. So nice to get to see a little bit of it in her background today.
Yeah.
I was actually picking my nutmegs today on my, literally in the rain on the soggy ground. I was like, I gotta do this for my show and tell. They come in all different sizes. I actually did pick up my juiciest today.
There are three different sort of sizes and formats of the nutmeg. So what Bobbie held up earlier is the nutmeg still in the fruit. It's the pit of a little fruit.
Before it cracks open like this, it's actually a nice little fruit. It looks like a little bit like an apricot and has a little bum. And so we call this yellow piece the pericarp. And so this is essentially like the nice fruity bit. And we use that actually a lot for jams in Grenada. And then underneath we have, this is called Mace, which is essentially the sister spice of nutmeg. And it's a nice red webby sort of part of it. And then underneath, that's where you get to the shell of the nutmeg. And so this one is a green nutmeg, but when you crack it open, it becomes this.
So, okay, I'm gonna backtrack a little. What exactly is nutmeg?
Nutmeg is not a nut. It's not a tree nut. It is a fruit. And what the actual nutmeg is the seed of the fruit. So you get the real concentrated flavor of the fruit. And then as you go out through the outer layers, when you get to the mace, then it's like a more subtler, fragrant sort of, side thing. I think Ethan would be able to talk more about the flavors of it. And then when you get to the pericarp, this is like more fruity, but you have to, when you make it into a jam, you have to essentially nearly boil it twice because the flavor is so intense. And so you really, really need to cook it down. You can't, I would not bite into it as it is right now. It's too intense.
What does nutmeg and what does the pericarp and what does mace taste like to you? What's the difference in taste?
Pericarp is a very tannic, kind of a sticky flavor, and it dries your mouth out. So, and like Bobbie said, you could try to bite into it, but it has the texture of a potato, and it just makes your teeth and gums kind of sticky in this not very pleasant way. So it's not like a nice eating fruit, but it has a really interesting complex flavor, sort of halfway between nutmeg and an unripe peach, if that makes sense. It has this sort of sour stone fruit kind of a flavor to it. And then mace, Bobbie was holding up a beautiful fresh mace, which is red, but they turn kind of yellow-orange as they dry, just as part of the natural drying. Mace has that kind of distinctive nutmeg sort of spice complexity, but a little lighter, a little sweeter, a little more subtle, sort of the difference between pesto and nutmeg being the pesto and mace being the fresh basil or something. They share a common flavor, but the difference is kind of intensity and sweetness, where nutmeg is more intense and mace is sweeter. And then the nutmeg itself, so this is in the shell. You can see that kind of glossy dark shell, and you can see the, you know, sort of the patterns on the shell where the mace was attached. Just gonna crack this open.
Oh,
So I just hit it with a spice jar, and the shell pops open, and you get, you know, this more familiar whole nutmeg inside. Nutmeg really varies a little bit depending on where it comes from. There are different varieties. There are male and female trees. And so the flavors can be slightly different based on the gender of the tree, the variety of nutmeg, where it was grown, how it was dried, male and female. Bobbie, remind me, the female is rounder and the male is more oblong. Is that right?
That is what we have been told. I actually tried to look up online as well, just to make sure, and it's still subject to debate. There's like male, female, and then a combination of the two. So this is the Grenada, like this is what we know as male, and this is what we know as female.
And even the flowers smell a little different between the male and the female trees. So when you crack open a nutmeg pod, or a nutmeg pit rather, you'll see like these really dark contrasting colors. The focus is a little off, but the white base and the brown lines, and that's the oils welling to the surface. I mean, I smell this already. It's amazing. And fresh, a really good nutmeg should have that like classic kind of pumpkin spice warm aroma, but it should also have kind of a sharpness to it, a little bit of, I don't know, is it eucalyptus or menthol, or there's like a kind of minty thing. I don't know, Bobbie, what do you think?
There is like that sort of like aftertaste as well. And you know what I found, like when I grate it, I try to have as literally like a really thin fine layer, so always using a microplane, because if your like grates are like a little bit too rough, then you get a strange like astringent bitter aftertaste sometimes, and you're like, oh, maybe not. So yeah, nice thin layers, microplanes, the best.
If anybody's used Tiger Balm, the Singaporean like muscle cream, they use a fair amount of nutmeg extract in the Tiger Balm. And so next time you use it, smell that, like look for that that aroma, because it's the warm, sweet aroma, but it's also that like eucalyptus kind of medicinal thing.
so it's amazing because I didn't know they put nutmeg extract in Tiger Balm, because I grew up with that stuff for literally anything from an insect bite to like bruises. But the first time I ever tasted nutmeg, I think I ate too much of it. And like Bobbie said, it was just like overwhelming. And I was like, this doesn't taste like food. It tastes like concentrated, dried, stale perfume in my mouth. And I was put off by nutmeg for so many years after that. But somebody, like a viewer a few weeks back, told me, just grate a little bit into your meat stew. And I did. And I was just so surprised by how much of a change, like it makes it more nuanced, and there's some kind of transformation that happens to the meat flavor that makes it taste almost like more tender, like you added 3 hours of cooking time to it.
Germany is the world's largest consumer of nutmeg per capita. So per person, they eat more nutmeg than any other country in the world, because it's all in meat. It's all in cured meat dishes, sausages, things like that, because nutmeg and meat is a classic combination.
How exactly do you produce mace and nutmeg? Like Ethan, I just saw Bobbie break open the fruit, the pericarp, and then Ethan, you just cracked it all the way through. And is that it? Is there no processing once you pick the fruit from the tree?
So after the fruit is picked from the tree, basically we have all our nutmeg pickers. They obviously take it apart. They remove, I'll do it again, the mace from the nutmeg, and then it's sent down for drying. The mace, if it stays intact like that, it gets dried in the sun, and that's over about 6 to 8 weeks. And it's the same thing for the nutmeg. So all the nutmegs are piled together, and they put on these like big drying trays with holes underneath, and then they're turned every single day until you dry it enough that you can essentially hear a little wobble, and then then it's ready to go. And then it goes for cracking. So it all goes for cracking, and then it turns into this guy, and that's when it's ready. And the mace, when it's dried, it's dry when it gets to essentially this stage. The last little part to this, after they're cracked, they then go to this like basically a really big bathtub, and they all get thrown in there, and whatever ones floats, that means they don't have enough like oil content, and they're discarded or made into like oil or ground nutmeg. And then the good ones are the ones that sink, and so we take those ones up and then we dry them again, and then 2 days drying, that's when it's ready.
After it's dried, I assume you package it, you ship it off, you sell it, and then I get it and it's sitting in my shelf. Is there a period of time before all of the taste is no longer optimal?
Spices don't get better with age, so you do want to use it sooner rather than later. The nice thing about nutmeg is that it has this kind of natural coating on the outside, that pale sort of skin kind of that you can see here. So that does help preserve it. And whole nutmeg, like any whole spice, is going to have a longer shelf life than a ground spice. But I don't know, I think people generally are guilty of not using nutmeg enough.
What are your favorite ways to use it, both Ethan and Bobbie?
I would say for me, I genuinely do use it every day. And it's not because I've been with nutmeg for the last 10 days. I'm still not sick of it. So I actually put it on my overnight oats with my yogurt and a cocoa nibs. We also grow cocoa here as well. And if I don't have my little grating, my microplane grating of nutmeg, there's this different, it's just not complete. And then also I love it really weirdly on like hot buttered toast. Always have a grating of nutmeg. Anything with cheese, I just put it on top as well. And all my like dals and leguminous stews as well, day in, day out.
I really love the combination of nutmeg and cauliflower. Goes really well together. I don't really know why, but it does. My grandmother requested a cream of cauliflower soup recently, and I put a load of nutmeg in it, and it was a hit.
Do you know if there's any health benefits associated with consuming nutmeg?
Well, actually, you alluded to it earlier, Ethan, with the Tiger Balm. We use it here. So for the physical thing, we have something called Nutmeg here, and it's the nutmeg oil spray, and people use it for relieving pain. And so it's meant to have anti-inflammatory properties, and it's meant to be antibacterial as well. We usually use it to just flavor our food. We don't really think of the health benefits, but that is what it's said here to have those.
You can get pretty stoned off of nutmeg, I've been told. Malcolm X used to sprinkle nutmeg into his cigarettes. So it has other medicinal effects, depending on which direction you want to take it.
I actually looked this up on Wikipedia, and it says that some of the side effects of overdosing on the active ingredient in nutmeg may include convulsions, palpitations, nausea, dehydration, body pain, delirium, anxiety, confusion, headaches. It doesn't sound great.
You know, I don't recommend experimentation, but the literature is out there. If you want to do some reading and make your own prescription, then go for it.
I'm gonna put a huge disclaimer. Do not.
Right.
Bobbie, Ethan, thank you so much for being here. And is there anything else you want the people to know about nutmeg that you think deserves more attention?
Use more of it.
I was literally going to say the same thing. Put it on your countertop, put it in a little bowl, clip top drawer on your countertop, use more of it, get that microplane out, have it, put it on everything.
Thank you both so much. It's a little bit ridged and textured on the outside, rough and dry, and once grated, completely smooth. It almost feels like chalkboard to me. The grated powder truly disintegrates into a fine dust, making it very available for just disappearing into anything you put it in. Ooh. Okay. You're gonna find nutmeg very hard to use if you buy it whole and don't have either a spice grinder or a microplane, because this stuff is hard. And I gotta say, when I first bit down into it, the flavor was completely different. It's almost reminiscent of biting into citrus peel. There's a layer of fragrant essence, a little bit oily, a little bit spearminty, cooling, numbing, and then it goes into that bitter territory once you hit the pith of a citrus fruit. I'm intrigued. Based on this, I would say you can probably use nutmeg the same way you would use citrus peels, which is to say, wisely and in limited amounts. But you can almost use it anywhere, from desserts to savory stuff. I don't know if I'm imagining it, but it is very reminiscent of the numbing feeling you get from citron peppercorns right now in my mouth. And you know how much I like my citron peppercorns. This episode focusing on nutmeg will be kind of my road to redemption, because I never grew up liking nutmeg. And today, we're gonna start to learn nutmeg can be for everyone and can be used in almost anything. For this episode, we're gonna start off with some tried and true recipes by Mackenzie, our baking queen. And afterward, we'll wade out of the kiddie pool and into the deep dark waters. Adventure time, y'all. First up, we're gonna make Mackenzie's no-bake pumpkin cheesecake. It's an awesome dessert come summer or fall. It has all the creaminess and smoothness of traditionally baked cheesecakes, but with none of that pesky oven heat. And you know me, I love my cheesecake. It's gonna be a romantic date, just me and that cream cheese block. This recipe calls for canned pumpkin, or you can use your own pumpkin puree, whichever one you choose. My hot tip here is to drain your pumpkin puree. Canned pumpkin and homemade pumpkin puree can oftentimes come with a lot of moisture in it, which will lead to a runny cake. If you want your cake to hold its shape better, drain out that excessive liquid. To drain your pumpkin, put it into a fine mesh sieve. Go ahead and set it over a bowl that fits your sieve, and then top it with some paper towels to cover. Transfer it to your fridge and let it set overnight until you see at least a tablespoon or two of liquid draining out. To make this recipe, you're gonna need an 8-inch springform pan or any pan with a releasable bottom. First things first, you're gonna crush your ginger snaps. You can do this by hand with a rolling pin and a bag, or you can put it into your blender or food processor and just let it go until it's nicely finely crushed. In a medium bowl, we're gonna combine our crushed ginger snaps, our sugar, and melted butter, and we're gonna mix it until that mixture resembles wet sand. We're gonna press that into our springform pan and pat it into an even layer. In a medium bowl, we're gonna beat our heavy cream until it reaches those stiff peaks. If you ever find that your heavy cream kind of splatters everywhere in your kitchen, I like to transfer it to the kitchen sink if you have enough space in there and let it whip in there. A much more splatter-proof environment. Whenever you're making cheesecake, it is very important that you set your cream cheese out at room temperature until it's nice and soft. Softened cream cheese will encourage even, smooth blending and the finest texture you'll ever dream of. So go ahead, take your perfectly softened cream cheese, put it into a large bowl, and we're gonna beat it until it's nice and fluffy and light. As you're mixing your cream cheese, you want to make sure you're scraping down the sides of your bowl so that you can ensure all the little nuggets are getting smooth and beaten out. We're going to add our drained pumpkin puree and we're going to beat until no lumps remain. We're going to add in some powdered sugar and beat again until very, very smooth. We're going to add in our vanilla, our cinnamon, and our nutmeg, and a little bit of salt. We're going to beat all of that until it's well incorporated. Be careful here that you're not over whipping your cream cheese. When you over whip your cream cheese, it creates air inside there, and when air inside there gets too much, it creates a soft cake, which is nice when you want a fluffy baked cake, but not when you want to slice into a nice, creamy, dense slice of no-bake cheesecake. Go ahead and fold in your whipped cream and go until it's just combined. Pour that batter over your crust and smooth the top with an offset spatula. We're going to refrigerate this until it's set about 4 hours and up to overnight. I highly recommend that you give this cake time. If you're impatient, it will result in a very soft slice. If you're having a very hot summer and it's not quite setting even in the fridge after you take it out, you can go ahead and pop it into the freezer. We love this cake straight from the freezer because it holds its shape very well and that creaminess almost tastes a little bit like ice cream. Nice and solid. To serve, go ahead and plop on a little dollop of extra whipped cream, a little bit of extra crushed ginger snaps, and dig in. It is rich, it is smooth, it is creamy, and you know what? It is light, which is not something that you get out of an everyday cheesecake. You've got that ginger snap crust on the bottom, pumpkin-y goodness in the middle, rich whipped cream on top with a little dressing of ginger snaps and a little more nutmeg. I don't know, guys. This is as good as autumn gets for me, or summer. That extra pinch of nutmeg really brings out the little kind of colorful peaks in that ginger snap crust, and it really lightens up that deep canned pumpkin taste into something fresher, more exciting, tastes a little more expensive. If you actually want to get into that autumn spirit as the storm falls outside my window, baked apples are the way to go. This is another Mackenzie recipe. Not only does it have cinnamon in it, it has nutmeg in it. Nutmeg pairs really well with fruits and nuts, with sugar and butter, although what doesn't pair well with butter? So obviously it's a great fit for this particular recipe. it has oats, it has brown sugar, it has butter, it has apples. Mackenzie's favorite apples to use are the Honey Crisp. They're juicy and they're sweet and they're a little bit tart and they bake beautifully. However, you can really use whatever apples you have on hand as long as you like it. Depending on the moisture level and the thickness of the skins, each type of apple will bake a little bit differently, and also, depending on the size, adjust your cooking times. We don't really recommend using really soft apples like Macintoshes. They break down way too easily and they can turn into mush rather fast. And as for Red Delicious, if you get it farm fresh, these are actually really delicious. But if their skins are a little bit too thick for you, what I like to do is peel them in strips, alternating so that you get stripes. First things first, preheat your oven to 375 degrees. We're gonna take our nicely washed and dried apples and we're gonna take a melon baller and we're gonna scoop out that core without hitting through to the bottom. You wanna make sure the bottoms are intact so that your filling does not fall out. If you don't have a melon baller, I also really like to use a metal round teaspoon. If you have a bigger apple in combination with smaller apples, I recommend carving out more of the flesh out of the bigger ones so that this way it can bake at about the same rate as the smaller ones. Besides, this means you get more snacks. When it comes to chopping nuts, if you don't feel like fidgeting with the knife or the food processor, you can just go ahead and give it a crush by hand, especially when it's pecans. They are soft and breakable. In a medium bowl, you're gonna whisk together butter, oats, brown sugar, toasted pecans, cinnamon, nutmeg, and salt. We're using nice and softened butter here, and you're gonna work it in with your fingers or a spatula until everything's evenly combined. You wanna make sure you're mixing it until everything clumps together and it feels almost a little bit like cookie dough. Once you have that mixture, go ahead and spoon it generously into your apple cavities. Place your apples into a baking dish, cover them loosely with foil, and slide them into your preheated oven. We're going to let them bake for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to remove the foil, turn that tray around, push it back in for another 20 to 30 minutes. You're looking for tender apples, you're looking for thick, syrupy goodness leaking out into the bottom of your baking dish, and you're looking for something that you want to dig into with a spoon or a fork. As you can see, different apples will bake very differently, so be sure to keep an eye on the moister ones because they will burst if you leave them in there for too long. If you chose a heartier apple and it still hasn't quite broken down in 50 to 60 minutes of total baking time, you can go ahead and just throw it back into the oven until it's your desired texture. Don't let the numbers dictate success, let your eyeballs and your taste buds speak for themselves. It should be tender enough that once your spoon or fork goes through it, it cuts like a knife. If this isn't the best part of fall, I don't know what is. Soft, tender apples, nutty, buttery, oaty filling, and that caramel just drizzling all over your plate. Perfect for mixing with some ice cream. And if you do go for that ice cream, you might as well go for that extra nutmeg too. Treat yourself, because you deserve it. It's possible that I'm getting addicted to nutmeg, you know? I'm not really sure exactly how much nutmeg I have to eat to overdose, but we may get there today. Not sure how you're feeling, but I'm gonna need to take a break from sweets and get some protein today. My first thought is, how do you take something seemingly as boring as poached chicken and make it an exciting recipe? And the first thing that popped into my head was, you make a sauce. In my case, I think we're gonna go with a white wine, nutmeg, and thyme gravy. I think it'll just be as creamy, as luscious as you need it to make it comforting, but also somewhat sophisticated in flavor. First things first, we're gonna pop open that bottle of wine, we're gonna give it a sniff, and if you so please, you can take a sip. A nice little start to any cooking adventure in the kitchen, am I right? Second thing we're gonna do is make a nicely tender poached chicken breast. If you're gonna wanna make poached chicken that isn't overcooked, having an instant read thermometer is pretty crucial. To begin, we're gonna take a medium large pot, we're gonna pour in about 4 cups of water and 1 tablespoon of kosher salt, and we're all gonna just let it stir until everything's dissolved. You're then gonna add your chicken, in my case 2 chicken breasts, and you're going to make sure that they are submerged in that water. For a more seasoned poached chicken taste, you can go ahead and just let this sit in that water brine for about 30 minutes before proceeding to the next step. We're going to cover our pot with a lid. We're gonna turn the heat up to a medium-low, and we're gonna let that cold water and chicken come up to a simmer together. The reason why we are cooking it in cold water is so that we can bring the temperature of the chicken up alongside the water, rather than putting the chicken into boiling water, at which point it will start to cook from the outside in, leading to a tough exterior and potentially an uncooked interior. When it does come up to a simmer, you want it on the lowest possible simmer. You want this to be a gentle cooking process, and you don't want to blast the heat up. All you want to see is little tiny bloop bloops. Slow and steady and low heat wins the race. Once your chicken comes up to a bare simmer, reduce your heat to the lowest possible heat setting. Let it simmer for 3 to 4 more minutes, and then keeping the lid on, turn that heat off and let your chicken continue to cook in that residual heat. We're going to let that chicken cook until the internal temperature reaches at least 165 degrees as per USDA mandate. Just note that depending on your breast size, this could take anywhere from about 5 minutes to 10 minutes. When your chicken is properly cooked, it should still have a little bit of give to it, but it should bounce immediately back. If there's no give whatsoever and your finger feels like it's hitting, I don't know, one of those hard handballs that you hit against the wall, overdone. But don't worry, with our gravy, you won't even notice that your chicken is super dang rubbery. For our gravy sauce, we're gonna take a small sauce pot, set it over medium heat, and we're gonna melt 1 tablespoon butter. We're going to add in some salt, pepper, and freshly grated nutmeg, and we're gonna let them toast for just a little bit, and then we're gonna whisk in a tablespoon of flour. We're going to keep cooking that flour, whisking constantly until it turns golden. And then we're going to slowly whisk in our wine. Go slow because it will sputter. Bring the wine up to a simmer and let it cook off until it has reduced somewhat. We don't really want that alcoholic taste of the wine, we just want the kind of fruitiness that it contributes. It should look smooth, and it should look nice and creamy and a little bit thick. And at this point, we're gonna pour in our cream as well as some water, a little bit of thyme, and we're gonna bring that up to a simmer, and we're gonna let it cook until it's nice, bubbly, and thickened. Alternatively, you can also eliminate the salt in the sauce and use your chicken cooking liquid instead. At this point, go ahead and slice your chicken breast, preferably against the grain for that tender bite. Drizzle your sauce over and top with a little bit of crushed red chili pepper flakes or lemon zest or both. This is a pretty easy peasy way to prep chicken breast, and I would say this is a really nice sauce to have on hand. You can serve it alongside a very simple salad, drizzle more of that gravy on top, and let everything complete your meal. Together with that fragrance of thyme, the perk of lemon zest, and the little tiny hint of spice from the red pepper flakes, I'm in favor of nutmeg and everything now. Just a little extra pinch on top makes that creaminess not taste as heavy and makes it taste more flavorful. Magic. While doing research on nutmeg, I found out that in French cuisine there is such a thing as 4 épices, literally meaning 4 spices. I feel like many cultures have a spice blend that they fall back on, but to me this was really fun because it has nutmeg alongside ginger, white pepper or black pepper sometimes, and cloves in the mix. And this was the first time I had ever heard of a spice mix in French cuisine. I grew up with 5-spice powder, which depending on the family and the region that it comes from can be a variation on the theme. The same goes apparently for 4 épices. There are regional variations. I figured with these warm spices, this mix might be perfect for roasting some vegetables and for putting into some squash soup. To make our roasted veggies, I'm going to chop up some carrots and onions that I have in my fridge. We're also going to add in some thyme because I have it and why not. Coat it in some oil, throw on the spice, toss to make sure it's evenly coated, and then throw it into a 375-degree oven until everything's nice and tender. We also want to see some caramelization out on the edges, and when that happens, we can pull and taste. As for our squash soup, I'm gonna melt some butter into the pan. I'm gonna throw the spice mix in, wait for that to all kind of bloom and get fragrant, and then we'll toss in some garlic as well as our squash. This is some puree that I have left over from previous testing rounds. You can basically use whatever cooked squash you have. Once your squash is warmed through, go ahead and stream in some chicken broth. Add some salt. Towards the end, I like to stream in just a little bit of cream for added richness. If you like it smooth, you can go ahead and immersion blend it. And what's life without a little garnish on top? Do you see the little specks of spice in there? Because I can taste it, and it tastes pretty damn good. Almost tastes like a creamier, slightly looser version of mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving. If you like traditional winter sweet spices with a combination of a low heat from the white pepper, I think you're gonna like quatre épices. As for these carrots, they have a very fascinating taste to them. There is almost an unexpected umami quality to it, which was a little bit strange at first, but now I'm into it. If you bite down on some crunchy onion pieces, they taste almost 95% exactly like those chips. What exciting days we live in. Spinach stuffed shells is usually a dish composed of al dente boiled large shell pasta stuffed with a mixture of ricotta, mozz, spinach, covered in a red sauce, baked until nice and gooey and cheesy. It's such a classic dish that literally the poster child on this box of shells is spinach stuffed shells. So yeah, we're essentially gonna make this. We're not gonna stray too far from the formula, but we're gonna add in some nutmeg. We're also gonna be doctoring up some marinara that's been pre-made with extra garlic and a little more nutmeg, so you know, it's only gonna get more delicious from here on out. Nutmeg is both delicious in dairy and apparently in tomato products, so today we're gonna put that to the test and see how this tastes. The first thing we're gonna do is to cook our pasta to al dente according to package instructions, probably minus 2 to 3 minutes. I just always assume nowadays that the box lies, so if it says 10, start checking it at 6 to 7 minutes. Chances are, these will be ready before you know it. I like to take a large pot, put it over medium heat, fill it with water, a tablespoon of salt, dump my pasta in, and then stir to make sure nothing sticks to the bottom. Once the water comes up to a boil, I set my timer for about 5 minutes, and then I start biting into them to see if they are done. I want to pull them when there's still a thin white line in the center of each bite. Once your pasta is al dente, you gotta drain it immediately. Shake it completely dry over your colander. Make sure there's no water hiding in the nooks of those shells, because those will keep on cooking your noodles, and we don't want soggy noodles, especially if they're getting baked again. Then we're gonna make our filling. Now before we make our filling, we have to defrost our frozen spinach, which I recommend you doing over a colander, fine mesh sieve, or in a clean kitchen towel. You basically wanna push or wring out all of the water so that they don't leak into your pasta. I also just like to run my knife through the leaves after I finish wringing them out, because this way I can ensure there's no big fibrous bits that are hard to chew through. In a large bowl, we're gonna combine together our egg, ricotta, mozzarella, parm or pecorino, your choice, along with your spinach, nutmeg, pepper, red pepper flakes, as well as a little lemon zest if you want it, pinch of salt, and a grated garlic. Don't forget to add the thyme like I did. We're gonna go ahead and transfer this to the refrigerator until we're ready to use it. If you don't have time or you just prefer other herbs, go ahead and substitute in your other herbs. It could be parsley, it could be basil, it could even be scallions. Your choice. Then we're gonna doctor up our marinara sauce. So in a large oven-proof skillet over medium heat, we're gonna pour in some olive oil and we're gonna put in some crushed garlic cloves. We're gonna let those toast, stirring occasionally until they're nice and golden. We're going to add in our nutmeg and stir very quickly, 10 to 20 seconds, until we smell some fragrance coming out of that pan. And then we're gonna pour in our marinara as well as a little bit of sugar just to help balance out all of those flavors. Give it a stir until it's nice and combined, and once that marinara is mostly warmed through, take out 2/3 of it and leave 1/3 in the pan. Smooth that remaining marinara in the pan into a smooth, even layer, and then we're gonna start stuffing our shells. I just like to open up the shells a little bit, put a little spoonful in, put a little more spoonful in until that shell is pretty full. We don't want to jam pack it, but we definitely want to make sure that it's not hungry. If your shells look hungry, you probably will be too. After your shells are filled, go ahead and layer them in that skillet. Spoon your marinara sauce on top, and then top with a little more mozzarella and peck, or parm, your choice. To avoid drippage that then burns on the floor of your oven, go ahead and set your pan over a sheet tray to catch any drippings. And we're gonna bake this at 375 until the cheese is melty and the sauce is kind of bubbly. To avoid the pasta drying out and to enable the cheese to melt, we're gonna cover it loosely with foil for the first half hour. When we go into peak at the half hour mark, we're gonna lift off the foil and let that cheese get nice and golden. Cheesy, saucy, pasta-y. What more could you want? I don't know. It's a pretty complete meal for me. Go ahead and top it with more cheese, a little more nutmeg if you'd like, and a little extra lemon zest or herbs if you'd like. Filled with delicious ricotta, mozzarella, and most of all, spinach. This dish will not only make you happy, it'll make your mom proud. To moms everywhere, we are getting our vegetables in. The pasta shells are still kind of al dente, definitely not mushy, and the filling just as fresh and spinachy as it is cheesy and saucy. And you know, as good as it is, I just can't help but put on a little more nutmeg. There is something so intoxicating about this flavor. Drop us a comment down below if you can describe the flavor of nutmeg. For me, this is the perfect dish to sit down to on a weeknight, or, you know, make it for the entire family. Everybody just dig in. You may not even need dishes. For some reason, the flavor of nutmeg reminds me of one word, and that word is reserve. Can you make sense of that? Well, next up we have cheese blintzes. Welcome to the last recipe of this Nutmeg Spice Show episode. Congratulations, you've made it to my final assignment for this week, cheese blintzes. Cheese blintzes are an Ashkenazi Jewish treat that is beloved across brunch menus everywhere, and it can swing savory or sweet. To me, cheese blintzes kind of remind me of a hybrid between an egg roll and a burrito and a sweet cannoli, which is to say, it is in fantastic company among the great foods of the world that comes in a roll. And I'm thinking for our cheese blintzes today, we can put in nutmeg everywhere. A little nutmeg in the crepe batter, a little nutmeg in our cheese filling, a little nutmeg on top perhaps. A lot of cheese blintz recipes have an egg in the filling to hold it all together, but today we're gonna skip the egg so that you don't have to rebake them or re-sear them and you can just roll them up and eat them. Instead, what we're gonna do is up the ratio of cream cheese to ricotta so that you still get that tangy, sweet goodness without running all over the place. To help that filling be a little bit more set, I like to place my ricotta in a fine mesh strainer overnight and let that liquid drain out. There's a lot in there. Yes, it's gonna add a little more time to your recipe, but it is all hands-off time and I highly recommend it. To begin, we're gonna make our crepe batter first so that it can sit and set up for a little bit. In a medium bowl using a hand mixer, we're gonna whisk together our eggs until frothy, and then we're gonna add in some milk, salt, nutmeg, and powdered sugar. We're gonna let all of that beat until it's nice and smooth, and then we're gonna place some flour in a large bowl and we're gonna add half that egg mixture in. We're going to whisk and beat that in until it's fully smooth, and then we'll add in the remaining egg mixture in. We're doing this in batches so that you can avoid getting clumpy mess, and then after it's all nice and smooth, we'll add in our melted butter. We're going to cover that bowl and let it rest for at least 30 minutes up to overnight in the fridge. While we wait on the batter to rest, we can make our filling. In a large bowl using a hand mixer, we're gonna beat together our cream cheese and powdered sugar until completely smooth. We'll add in our ricotta, our lemon zest, and a little bit of vanilla, salt, and nutmeg, and we're gonna fold that together. Transfer your cheese mixture to the fridge until you're ready to use, and we'll move on to our fruit toppings. You have a choice here. You can either make a berry sauce with either blueberries or raspberries, or you can make a prune sauce, which admittedly doesn't look fantastic, but I love prunes. What can I say? For the berry sauce, you're gonna put your berries of choice with sugar and lemon juice in a small pot over medium heat, and you're going to bring that up to a simmer. You're going to let the berries cook until they burst, and you're gonna stir it occasionally to facilitate the syrup formation. Once the berries are mostly broken down and the syrup turns shiny and it starts to thicken into a sauce, about 4 to 5 minutes in, take it off the heat. Now if it starts setting up and you think it's too thick to be drizzleable, go ahead and just stream in teaspoons of water until you reach your ideal consistency. For the prune sauce, I like to go in with chopped prunes with a little bit of rum and a little bit of sugar and water. We're gonna bring it up to a simmer and we're gonna cook until those prunes break down into that sauce. It won't be completely smooth, so you're welcome to go ahead and immersion blend it once it turns into that thick, chunky sauce. If prunes are a little too grandma-y for you, add in a little bit of lemon juice to perk up that sweet flavor. Once you have your cheese sauce and once you have your toppings, we are ready to cook the crepes. In a medium skillet over medium heat, we're gonna melt a little bit of butter. We're going to add about a 1/4 cup of batter to the pan and we're gonna swirl it evenly to coat the bottom. Now, crepes for blintzes are really fascinating in that usually they don't get cooked on the second side. So we're going to cook this on the first side only, and we're gonna cook it until the edges start to dry up and peel away from the pan and the top surface is completely matte. This gives you an extra cooked and caramelized one side with a soft, slightly doughy inside. What I love about blintzes is because you'll be rolling them up into a little tiny burrito, you won't see imperfections, so don't stress too much about it. We're going to transfer the cooked crepes off to a plate and we're gonna repeat with our remaining batter. To assemble your blintzes, go ahead and place a crepe on a clean surface and dollop about 3 tablespoons of filling on the bottom of that crepe. Go ahead and tuck in that bottom flap, then tuck in the sides and continue rolling that blintz up into a log. Repeat with remaining crepes and filling until we have a whole army of blintzes, and then we can go fire up our skillet again over medium heat. We're gonna melt in some butter again and we're gonna lightly sear these on all sides until they're nice and golden. This step is optional, you can just eat the blintz after you roll them up, but if you like a little bit of a crunch, this is the way to go. And if you want extra credit, towards the last 20 seconds of your searing, go ahead and lightly sprinkle on a layer of granulated sugar over your blintzes and wait for that sugar to caramelize lightly. That way you can have a sugary, crackly crust. Because we have filled these blintzes to the max, be quick about the sear. Just as soon as that sugar starts to melt, pull it. We don't want the filling to burst out and leak everywhere. Or, that's also delicious too. Transfer to a plate to cool slightly and then serve with your berry sauce and whatever else you should desire. If you like some fresh berries on top, go for it. If you want a little bit more lemon zest, go for it. And if you want a little more nutmeg, definitely go for it. It's tart, it's sweet, it's creamy, it's tender. It's like the best brunch ever. The taste of vanilla is sweetly infused throughout every single bite. And you know what? The nutmeg, it's there, but it's not there. If you didn't tell me there was nutmeg in here, I would not have known. But there is something so deep and rich about this blintz that I don't think it would be the same without the nutmeg. The crepe is fork tender. You don't need a knife for this. It's thin, it's fragile, delicate, and delicious. And that prune, I gotta have it. Grandma's everywhere, know where it's at. It's delicious. Y'all, I don't know what to say except that I'm a happy camper, and man oh man, I cannot believe I wasted 6 years of my life hating nutmeg, because today my opinions have changed. And it's a good thing, because now I have the miracle of sophisticated, delicious, beautiful, ethereal nutmeg on my side. And together we will walk hand in hand off into the sunset forever and ever and be happy together. A big, huge thank you to Ethan and Bobbie for educating me and all of us on the magic of nutmeg, and I hope to see you suggest to me new recipes involving nutmeg that I haven't tried yet. I want to know all of your tasty, delicious things. Drop a comment down below. And until next time, stay beautiful.